Binder Podcast is filmed in front of an audience of no one. Okay, so this is the place. Microphones are here. I got lights right here. In fact, really the most important thing you need to know is the light switch is right there. So when you need to see, that's how you do it. My number is on the table, so you can call me if anything goes wrong. I'm not worried. I know you're going to have it totally covered, but just in case, if you didn't read the memo, just no parties, okay?
All right.
Okay. I'm trusting you, Dana. People have been trying to burst down the door of the studio since we started this podcast, and I really appreciate you stopping them. So I'm getting out of here, and I'll see you in a week.
All right. Well, have fun.
Okay.
No parties.
No parties.
All right. He didn't say no drag queens. All right. It's clear. Come on in.
Fairy dust. Oh my God. Is he gone yet?
I think so.
Okay, good. I took off my heels before I came in. Give me a quick second. I'm going to put him back on. And then, hey, what do you say? Let's have a party.
All right. Let's have a party. Welcome to Binder. My name is Dana Witkoski, and I am so excited to be sitting here with Patti O'Furniture, my friend and longtime collaborator at the Columbia Museum of Art. Patti, how are you?
I am doing fabulous. I am so excited to be here on Binder today and to talk a little bit about the Columbia Museum of Art.
Thank you. Well, we are really thrilled that you have taken time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We really want to talk about, drag and, your history with drag culture as a performer, but also, as an artist and what that means to you. So before we, really dive too deep in, I just have some pretty basic questions I want to kind of get off my plate. So first, when did you start drag?
Well, you are in luck because just a little over a week ago, I celebrated my 24th anniversary as a drag performer. My very first show was October 11th, 1999, right here in Columbia. And it was over at the University of South Carolina. And as legend would have it, I was working at the school at the time, and my students needed a little motivation. And what better way to motivate them than say, okay, you want to have a drag show? You need to raise some money to put on the drag show? Well, if you raise the money, I'll get on stage and be in the drag show. The students had the money the next week, and I had to live up to my end of the bargain. So the wig went on, the heels went on, and the rest, as they say, is herstory.
I love that. So how much money did they have to raise? Just curious.
They needed $500 to pay for a DJ. Yes, and now everyone's thinking, gosh, $500, that shouldn't be hard. When you're a college student and you're having to sell donuts door to door, yeah, it was a challenge. But it just goes to show you how drag can be motivating. I love the fact that as a performer, I get to talk to people, I get to share stories with them, and hopefully motivate them to, come out to support the Columbia Museum of Art, or to support another nonprofit, or to maybe love and embrace somebody in their family who's a little bit different. Whatever the message is, I love the fact that I can use my persona as a drag entertainer to motivate people. And it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
Kind of like a motivational speaker, but...
A motivational speaker who's 7 feet tall. Yeah.
I love that. So do you have any parts of your outfit that you wore from that first show still?
I actually have both of the costumes that I wore that first night. They don't fit anymore. Patti's grown a little bit. I still have the very first wig that I ever wore. And just recently, in honor of my anniversary this year, I had that wig restyled to look a little bit different, but she's still with me. Reminds me of where I've come from, because I think that's an important lesson for everybody. I think whether you're an artist or an entertainer or a student, keep bits of your early work so that you can look back on them and realize, wow, look what I've learned. Look where I've come from. And if you ever want to see a picture of Patti that first night, oh, she looks so different. So different. It's much like an artist learning how to do brush strokes. And sometimes their early paintings look like it was done by a chimpanzee at the zoo. And then later it looks like Van Gogh. Yeah. My face looked like the chimpanzee at the zoo painted me for quite some time. And eventually you perfect the craft. And I can easily say I'm still perfecting that craft. I love learning. I love adapting. I love changing little things about my performance. So, it really is fun. There's been a lot of talk recently about drag as art. And I really view it that way. I mean, we're working with paint and brushes. We're working, some people view theater as art. Of course it is. And that's what I'm doing. I'm putting on a costume and I'm performing a part on stage to entertain audiences.
I love that. So, as an artist, then you have a lot of processes and techniques, that you've really had to grow into. Is there any visual artists that you might kind of be drawn to or?
Well, I initially thought you were going to ask me if there was any technique that I've tried to perfect over the years. And the answer is eyeliner.
Same here.
For anyone who has never worn eyeliner, let's just say, I don't wear contacts either. So I'm not used to putting things near my eye. And so when I first went to put eyeliner on and mascara, I was constantly poking myself in the eye. And so I've perfected that, or we're getting there. We're getting there. But as far as inspirations, my original nickname was the yard sale with legs. Because for the first few years that I performed, I didn't have a lot of money to put into drag. So I took hand-me-downs from other queens. I took items that might have been cast off from somewhere and reworked them. I did a little bit of recycling. So I look at artists who repurpose things, who might take textiles and rework them into a costume, or who take recycled materials. One of my favorite artists here in Columbia is Kirkland Smith.
Mm-hmm.
I just adore Kirkland because she creates these beautiful, I'm going to call them paintings, but they sometimes look so realistic from a distance you think they're pictures. She will create a portrait of someone, and if you get close to it, you realize they are tiny bits and pieces of recycled material. Legos, bottle caps, straws, household items. And I think I identify with that because that's sort of what Patti O'Furniture is. She's bits and pieces of recycled material and hand-me-down wigs and things. And so I've never told Kirkland this, but I would definitely consider her an influence. But when it comes to drag queens, I think if I look at my makeup, it's inspired by people like Bianca Del Rio, who has such a dramatic look.
I love Bianca Del Rio.
I am very fortunate to consider Bianca a friend. We've worked together on a number of occasions, even before she was on RuPaul's Drag Race. And she has such a distinct look.
And she's funny.
Funny and not always PG funny. So sorry, listeners, you're not going to get a preview of Bianca.
What did she say? Don Rickles in a dress?
Yes. And she's a wonderful insult comic.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at her. I also look at some local drag entertainers. There's a legendary queen here in Columbia, Samantha Hunter. And Samantha has a middle name that is not PG appropriate. She's Samantha Mother something Hunter. And she was one of the first drag queens that I ever saw. And it's not about her look. It's not about her makeup. It's about her stage presence. She is just so spontaneous and so funny. And she engages the audience. And I'm really grateful that she was around when I started performing. She performed with me in my first show. I worked with her at my first bar here in Columbia when I started my first sort of professional gigs. And just her quick wit and her ability to engage an audience were really inspirational to me. because that's really what I do. I'm not known for my dancing. I'm not known for my celebrity illusions. I'm not known for, all of those. You're not going to ever see me do a death drop or a shablam or a split intentionally. But, I'm more of a hostess, an MC, a comedian. I like to engage the audience and put a smile on their face. And, Samantha does that. Bianca Del Rio does that. Miss Coco Peru, another legendary drag entertainer who is also a dear friend. Coco does that, and she's a storyteller. So lots of influences. But one of the things that I love about drag artistry is no two queens are alike. No two entertainers are alike. Drag is broadening its definition now. We now have a much wider spectrum with drag kings and gender nonconforming, non-binary entertainers who might look to the average untrained eye as if they were a woman, but then there's a beard. Or they might present in a more masculine way, but they are clearly feminizing parts of their look. Or they blend the two together, sort of like carnival entertainers, where you're thinking, oh gosh, is that the bearded lady? Or is that a clown? Or is that a magician? And you're like, I don't know what they are, but they're entertaining and I want to watch them.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's a good artist.
Yes. and I love playing the ringleader. I love being that master of ceremonies, mistress of ceremonies, because that gives me the power to lift up everybody in the cast and inform the audience of all of these different artists that are going to be laid out before them throughout the evening or throughout the afternoon. Because yes, drag doesn't happen just in the dark of the bars anymore.
No, it's taken over a lot of spaces. And I love that you mentioned, I don't know if you said community outright, but you're just a very community kind of driven artist. And I think that's definitely something worth talking about.
Definitely. And very proud to be a part of the Columbia community and have loved my ongoing relationship with my friends here at the Columbia Museum of Art, because one, for anyone who has never been to the Columbia Museum of Art, people don't believe me when I say this, but I speak from the heart. It is one of the best art museums ever. I mean, it has such a wonderful variety, but it's not complicated. And I love being a part of the Columbia Museum of Art family, whether it's doing events like Gay Bingo, or I shouldn't say Gay Bingo because we let straight people come too. It's more Drag Bingo.
All right, they're allowed.
We welcome everybody. The bingo events that we do. But one of my favorite events that you all have included me in is some of the gallery tours. I offer the unique perspective on some of the works in the collection. But the Columbia Museum of Art and Patti O'Furniture are just two little parts of our community. And Columbia gets a bad rap sometimes because we don't have a beach like Charleston. We don't have pretty fall leaves like Asheville. We don't have a big fancy downtown like Charlotte. Well, guess what we do have? We have a wonderful low cost of living. There's not a lot of traffic here. It's easy to get around. And right out the front door of the Museum of Art, we've got Soda City, Farmers Market on Saturdays. We've got the university and sporting events and things that happen in conjunction with our partners at USC. I always say Columbia is the world's largest small town. Don't go too far. Don't talk about somebody in the Piggly Wiggly because chances are their relatives in the next aisle. But I'm very, very proud to be a resident of Columbia and to have been a part of the Columbia community all these years. I mean, I've hosted the longest running drag show in the state of South Carolina right here in Columbia, every Tuesday night. And we've been doing it for all of 23 years. So almost as long as I've been performing. And it used to be that was tucked away. It was something that was hidden. But as Columbia has embraced all forms of performance and all forms of art, like our amazing theaters and our ballet companies and all the other art organizations we have, we're going to brag about our drag queens too.
Yeah. Have you had any moments where, maybe somebody who is in the audience has come up to you after the show and like outed themselves like, hey, I totally misperceived what drag queens could do. And I was very, maybe closed-minded, or they just didn't understand. And they came up to you afterwards and said you changed their mind?
I've probably had a handful of experiences like that. One happened just last night. I was hosting an event in Charleston, South Carolina. And during the evening, I'd shared a couple of personal stories. I always try and interject a little of my biography into every event. And at one point, I referenced that my mother had passed away and that my late mother had a form of cancer, because we were talking about Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I was sharing that information. And afterwards, two women came up to me. One said, "Thank you so much for talking about breast cancer awareness. I'm an oncology nurse. And to know that people are talking about what we're doing, we really appreciate that." And the other woman who was with her came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for sharing about your mother. I'm a survivor, and I'm sorry that your mom's not here with us, but she would be so proud of what you just shared. And it's people like you that make people like me want to keep on fighting." And that was just last night. But I've always said the greatest compliment I've ever received in 24 years of performing. I was doing my show in Columbia, and one night I was in a wild mood. And so I was really picking on some people in the audience pretty hard. Just very out of character for me. I'm usually so polite and demure and sweet. But these boys were hot, and so I had to pick on them. And afterwards, I went up to this one in particular, and I said, "Thanks for being a good sport tonight. I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't run off your friends," because he was sitting alone. I said, "I hope I didn't scare them off. I was so a little racier than I normally am." And he said, "Oh, no, I didn't know them. I'm here by myself, and I want to thank you." I was like, "Thank you for me picking on you?" And he said, "This is the first time I've ever been in a gay bar or to a drag show. When I came out in a relationship, and the guy that I was with, it wasn't a healthy relationship, and we just broke up, and I've been feeling all alone. I didn't know how to be gay. I didn't know where to find my people. And you let me know that my people are here. And you made me smile for the first time in a long time." And it was that last part that was like got my heart all tingly, because the fact that here was somebody who had been struggling with finding love and acceptance and a place to belong. And I thought I was picking on him and being all mean and stuff. And I put a smile on his face. And what's really neat is that I am still friends with him to this day. We stayed in touch. He moved away from Columbia, has since come back, is in a relationship with a great guy. And, to know that I played a small part in making somebody feel better about who they are or where they were in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody can do that. If you've ever been to one of my shows, I end almost all my shows with the same bit of homework. And it's very simple. I ask people to go out into the world and smile at one person they don't know, whether it's a clerk at a store, somebody they pass on the street, someone they see in an office building. Just share a smile with somebody, because you never know what somebody else is going through. And that one tiny act of kindness might be all that person needs to know that there's somebody else in the world that sees them and sees them and smiles. So I like to think of it as spreading happiness. So I try and practice that every day, even if it's the person who cuts you off into traffic, and you really want to make another hand gesture at them. Nope, turn and smile. But it's such a reminder of how little acts can have a ripple effect. I mean, it's sort of like, when I come to the Columbia Museum of Art and I see a particular painting, I usually leave and start talking about it to people. And I realize that's me just talking about something that I love, something that spoke to me. But maybe that person will come to the museum and they'll seek out that painting, and they may not like it as much as I do, but maybe they'll find another one, or maybe they'll find a sculpture, or maybe they'll tour one of the ever-changing exhibits, like the current exhibit you all have going on with Alexander McQueen. And they'll be as mesmerized as I was the first time I came in here and saw one of my favorite paintings, which is called A Visit from St. Nicholas.
Oh, yes. And you've been a work of art in the museum as well.
I have. I love being able to brag about being a part of the permanent collection here at CMA. Yes. Years ago, when you all had the Warhol exhibit, the staff of the museum decided we're not just going to hang a bunch of Andy Warhol paintings. We're going to find a way to bridge the work of Andy Warhol and the community and connect them with the art. And in this particular instance, some students over at USC, I believe, were studying Andy Warhol's techniques and how he created some of his signature looks. And they studied some of the subjects that Andy Warhol often included in his works.
Famous faces.
And a few drag queens. And so, yes, I loved the fact that Patti has been Warholized by some talented local artists. And I have one of those prints that hangs in my living room now.
Love that.
But I also love the fact that the students, I think they created 10 total prints of each face. And the museum, of course, kept the original. But the fact that those prints of Patti now hang in a doctor's office in Philadelphia, a private residence here in Columbia, a law office here in Columbia, and at least one home in California. So I don't know where the other ones are, but
I love that.
It was so neat when people send me pictures of Patti hanging on their wall. Just another example of how art takes on a life of its own and helps to bring people together, but also helps spread the wonderful art of Columbia outside of our boundaries and to parts unknown.
We'll be right back. You know, I guess like we've known each other for almost 10 years now, just through the CMA, but
we met in junior high.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's right. I still have braces. But
oh my gosh, I was listening to you on the radio.
But, you know, you've always just been such a great cheerleader. And it's, you know, very apparent that you are such a strong supporter of the arts in Columbia. I do have a kind of a loaded question, maybe. So if there were something you could change about drag culture, you know, whatever that may be to you, what would you change?
Okay, this isn't a loaded question. This is a thought-provoking question. Ooh. This is like one of those fancy, deep conversation questions. And I'm going to say the first thing that popped into my head, because that's usually the safest bet. I don't know that I would change anything about drag as an art form, because I love the fact that, especially over the past 10 years or so, it seems like it has expanded and taken on a variety of different forms. What I would change is something that's external. I would change the judgment that's placed on it, both by people within the drag community, because there are certain drag entertainers that will say, that drag's not good. That drag's not worthy of my stage. And I'll be honest, occasionally I am one of those queens. You know, when I'm putting together a show, there are certain entertainers that fit with the type of show I'm producing. And there's certain entertainers that don't fit. Just like when you're casting a play, or to use a different metaphor, when you're making a recipe. You know, there's certain spices that don't go in the recipe, or there's certain types of flour or certain types of sugar that you prefer to use. It doesn't mean that the spice or the sugar is bad. It just means that it's not right for that moment. So I encourage people to not be as judgmental. And to all of my fellow drag entertainers, what that means is quit using phrases like, all drag is valid, all drag is this. Don't speak in universals. Drag is art. Art is subjective. Everybody has a different point of view on it. Sometimes you're going to like one entertainer's look or one entertainer's performance style more than you like others. So that's judgment from within the drag world, and I'd love to see that change. But it's the judgment from outside the drag world that's what I'd really like to change. The perceptions that drag queens are somehow engaging in criminal activity. I mean, the laws across our country right now, and sorry, listeners, don't mean to bring it down and get so serious, but this is serious stuff. It's a serious time. I mean, there are 37 different states that have grappled with anti-drag laws this year. People, we have better things to worry about than locking up drag queens and saying that we're harming children. You want to protect children? Make sure that they have access to healthy meals and well-funded schools and safe school buses and safe roads to drive those buses on. It's this perception and this judgment that drag queens are doing something wrong. Drag story hours. When I was a kid, I loved having anybody read to me. And if they were dressed up in a costume, wow, I didn't give two thoughts to who was underneath the costume. I mean, whether it's Mickey Mouse, the fairy godmother, a drag queen, somebody dressed like a donkey, you name it. You're a kid. You see the character. You don't look any deeper. Kids don't process that. It's when moms and dads and adults tell them that the person reading the story is bad that kids start placing judgment on it. Mm-hmm. And that kind of stuff is what I'd love to see change. I'd love for us to just embrace drag as the art form that it is. And if you don't like drag queens, don't bring your kids to the story hour. Because the last time I checked, most 6-year-olds can't drive. How are they getting there, mom and dad? Just keep them at home. You don't want your grandma to stumble into the drag brunch? Well, then take her to Red Lobster instead, okay? Don't take her to the drag brunch. But for people who do want to enjoy a show, no. It's so silly to me. It's like, luckily here in South Carolina, we are not currently looking to outlaw drag. But in states like Tennessee and Florida, my friends who make a living as professional drag entertainers are being told that their job is illegal simply because they're playing dress up. I mean, what's next? Lawmakers in Florida going to bust up into Disney World and throw some handcuffs on Goofy for pretending to be a dog or whatever animal Goofy is.
I've never really. He's a dog, and he had a pet dog, which is very bizarre. You just reminded me of something. It's like historically, it's so interesting to me that drag is being outlawed in these states because years and years ago, women couldn't play in theater performances. Mm-hmm. So it was the men in costumes as women. And it's like a completely opposite side of the pendulum.
I love when people start looking at the history of drag because, and this is one explanation for where the word drag came from that I've heard throughout the years, but drag is actually an acronym and it comes from a Shakespearean stage direction because characters would enter in DRAG, dress resembling a girl. Because in Elizabethan England, women weren't allowed on stage. And I think a little bit of that puritanical mindset came from England over to the States. And I think that's sort of where it's come from. But look at our founding fathers. They were running around in tights and wigs. It's cyclical. And I think that right now, drag queens have become sort of the boogeyman because we're an easy target. But most every show that I do these days is family friendly. It's PG. I try not to curse or pick songs that have vulgar lyrics because I want to make it accessible. I also try and put my shows in venues that are accessible to everyone. That means, whether it's accessible to people who might have mobility issues or accessible to people who have sensory issues. About every other week, I have a young lady who has cerebral palsy who comes to my show in Columbia. She says she comes because she has fun and because we always have a place for her to sit. And is that illegal? Is that a crime? No. This is somebody who has probably been discriminated against in other locations And Patti O'Furniture says, honey, come on, you got a seat at my table. And she now has started, she takes over the show whenever she's in the audience, because now she has a seat at the table, and occasionally she'll get up there and she'll snap her little hand up in the air, or she'll put some glitter and sequins on. And she came with a tiara on her head one show. The fact that she's engaging, the fact that my art has connected with another person who is an other. You know, there's so many others in the world, whether we're put in another category because of our sexual orientation, our gender identity, our, health or physical limitations, whatever it is. There are a whole lot of others out there in the world. And the more we share our stories, the more we realize that all the others include us. Live and let live, as my grandmother used to say. If you don't like it, don't eat it, or don't go there, or don't pay for it. But you don't have to tear it down. You don't have to speak out against it just because you don't agree with it.
Well, I also wonder if folks knew how much charity work that you have done over the last 24 years. Maybe their perception would also change significantly.
Well,
I want you to brag. It's a big number.
Well, charity work. Sorry, I thought you were talking about those baby drag queens that I was helping. No, charity work takes on a lot of different...
Charity work would be a great drag name.
Oh, what? Oh, no, her last name would have to be Works. Werquees or something. Yes. Drag queens are famous for playing on words with their names, but they always have to spell them in the most bizarre way. Whenever I see a drag queen write their name down, I always have to ask them to say it, because I'm sure there's a play on words in there somewhere, and I struggle with it. Just quick side note, there's a wonderful drag queen that was on a season of Drag Race. Her drag name is Karen from Finance. And I kept trying to make that funny. I was like, there's a pun in there somewhere. It's referencing something. And I was like, no, it's the mundane name that makes it funny. She's Karen from Finance.
Kind of like Bob the drag queen. Like, it's just very
yeah.
It's like, yeah.
The best thing about Bob, who again is a dear friend, Bob, it's not even their real name. His real name is Caldwell.
That's fantastic.
Out of drag, Caldwell Dibbique performs as Bob the drag queen. And I'm like, all right. I just assumed that their name was like Robert or Bob or something. No, it's an acronym. It stands for Big Ol' Bottom, the drag queen.
Okay. I had no idea about that.
But to your original point about the charity work, when I started performing, as I mentioned earlier, it started as a dare. And I thought it was just going to be a one-off. I did the show. All right. And about 6 months later, I attended a conference where we were in Atlanta. And at the time I was working in higher education. We did a drag show as part of the conference. And we went out to a bar to see this show. So I assumed that this was local drag queens in Atlanta that were performing. And about halfway through the show, I realized, no, it was my colleagues from the conference who all had side hustles as drag queens. So the vice president for student affairs at Iowa State University is a drag queen. The director of Greek life at University of Georgia, drag queen. The residence life coordinator from, DePaul University, drag queen. And we had this drag show, and it raised money for a scholarship. So all the tips that the drag queens made that night, they didn't keep. They put them in a bucket, and we raised several $1,000s for a scholarship for queer youth to participate in the summer leadership program. And I was like, wow, I could do that. I did drag once. I can do it a second time, and we can do it as a fundraiser. So I came back to Columbia and put together a charity drag show to raise money for a local AIDS service organization. And I was doing it in memory of one of my fraternity brothers from college who had passed away several years earlier from complications of AIDS. And so I did this charity drag show, and we raised several $1,000s for Palmetto AIDS Life Support Services. And the fundraiser was so successful that PALS hired me to be their director of development.
Oh, my God.
At that point, I was planning on leaving Columbia. I was looking for jobs in at other colleges and universities. But instead, I stayed around and at that point started doing Patti performances to raise money for the organization. And so since those very first shows, two things have remained constant. I always fill my bra with balloons. So if you ever see me and I'm a little extra busty, it's because I've blown up fresh ones. Yeah, most drag queens will use bird seed or will have like some kind of silicone breast form. It's like, oh, no. I'm going to go straight to Cromer's Peanuts here in Columbia and buy me a bag of balloons.
Support local.
Oh, yes. So that the balloons have always been one thing. The other thing has been that every dollar I've ever collected on stage, I have donated back to charity. And that includes local organizations like CMA and PALS, but also national organizations like the Trevor Project, which is the largest organization in the country whose sole mission is to save the lives of LGBTQ young people through their suicide prevention hotlines and other outreach efforts. And I've been very, very fortunate. I collect tips at all my shows. Sometimes I'll do fundraisers on a larger scale. And as of this year, I raised almost $1.6 million for different organizations. And I always say that's not my money. I'm just the pipeline that takes it from all these wonderful people who come to my shows and directs it to organizations that need it, whether it's an arts organization, an environmental cause, an LGBTQ plus organization. Right now, because we're in the fall, it's election season, I am funneling some money to different organizations that encourage people to vote and get involved in the political process. I said one of my favorite 4-letter words is vote.
And, to that, you kind of grew up in politics.
Maybe.
You mentioned your mom earlier. Do you want to tell us a little bit about her?
Well, my mom is just one of the people in my life that I love to brag about. I come from a long line of public servants. Years ago, I would have called my mom a politician, but as she reminded me, politics is just the means to an end. A true politician hopes to get a job as a public servant, helping the people that elected them and serving them. But yes, my late mother was, until recently, the only woman ever elected to the United States House of Representatives to represent South Carolina in Washington, D.C. And she served for 6 years representing upstate South Carolina in Congress. And before that, she was one of the only women in the South Carolina State Senate. And her first foray into politics, she was the only woman elected to the Spartanburg County Commission. Her sister, by the way, my aunt, lives down in Charleston, and she has a political career of her own, former mayor of Sullivan's Island and member of the Coastal Council. But no, Mom served on local, state, and federal levels. But her father, my late grandfather, was a former governor of South Carolina and a former U.S. senator. And actually, for South Carolina historians, the only man to ever defeat Strom Thurmond. My grandfather was governor in the 30s and 40s, and then in 1945 moved to Washington to represent South Carolina in the U.S. Senate. And funny little side note, he had a license tag that was on the front of his car, and it said South Carolina U.S. Senate number 1, because he was the senior senator for the second half of his tenure in Washington. Well, years later, my mother found this license plate, and she gave it to me. And I have it in my home, but I made a copy of it, and I put it on the front of my car, because in South Carolina, people use the front of their license plate sort of as a decorative license plate. So the front of my car, I have a license plate that says U.S. Senate 1, South Carolina. And nothing tickles me more than if I'm driving around town going to a show and I'm in full drag and I get out of the car and people point to the license tag. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm Lindsey Graham in drag. Maybe I'm Tim Scott in drag. Who knows? It's a wonderful conversation piece. But yes, I am very, very fortunate to come from a family that truly believes in public service. And in the early days of Patti O'Furniture, my mom didn't completely understand what I was doing and was a bit confused by my art form. But then she saw me perform and realized that what I was doing was my version of public service. I may not be elected to anything, but I'm using my voice to help my community and lift up the people that are around me. And it's what my mom did throughout her entire life. We're a family that truly believes in supporting the community that we're a part of. Because as my mother used to always remind me, you can't spell community without you and I.
I think I got all that. I mean, those are all the questions that I have. Real quick, what would my drag name be?
Oh, well, now here's the question, Dana. If you were to do drag, what type of character would you like to present? Because traditional drag would have you as someone who in her daily life presents as a female. We would have you in masculine drag as a drag king. But respecting all forms of drag, I'll let the artist decide, how would you like to present yourself in your drag persona?
I mean, I guess I would be a drag king.
Okay, so we need to come up with somewhat of a masculine name for you. Now, my first gut instinct is to say, since you go by Dana, that we might do a spin on Dana. You might be Dan or Danny. And I mean, I want to have some fun with this. So, and listeners, again, if you agree with me, feel free to send some other suggestions in if you think I've gone off the rails here, or send large donations to the CMA with, we love Dana's drag name, and oh my gosh, we can't wait to see them perform. I think your name should be Danny Soar.
Okay, I like that. Danny Soar.
Yes. Kids would get it, adults would get it, and it could be a true play on words, because if you spelled your last name S-O-R-E, oh my gosh, my feet are so sore. Oh my gosh, my head is so sore.
Oh, I'd have to be from like Jersey.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea where that accent just came from. It's like I've lived in South Carolina my entire life, and all of a sudden I start getting these vocal affectations.
I love it.
It's like you think I was an actress or something.
Well, I can't wait for those donations to roll in.
Hey, you heard it here first, folks. Live at the CMA, it's the debut performance of Danny Soar and his handy sidekick, Patti O'Furniture. Well, I've had a blast being with you and sharing a little insight into who I am and my art. But I know folks might want to track me down on social media. And so if they're ever looking for me, I make it really easy. Any social media platform you're on, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. I'm not on Christian Mingle anymore. Mr. O'Furniture made me get off that. Not on Domino's Delivery anymore because I gained too much weight. But all of my social media handles are very simple. It's all about Patti. And that's P-A-T-T-I, because I am Patti O'Furniture. And you can check me out on my new website, allaboutpatti.com. But I've had so much fun being with you today. And the only thing I can say is now that like Dad's gone and let us play in the playroom all day today, I think we should do this more often. So let's send him on vacation. And I say we take over, Binder. Listeners, if you agree, just send your comments in and let us know. And Dana and Patti will be back anytime you need us.
Patti O'Furniture is a drag performer based in South Carolina who's been entertaining audiences across the country for nearly 25 years. She was featured in the Season 2 premiere of We're Here on HBO. She's been honored with the titles of Miss South Carolina Pride, Miss Red Ribbon Friends, Vista Queen Emeritus, and the Yard Sale with Legs by her fellow performers and fans. Patti is also a devoted philanthropist, donating every dollar she earns on stage to causes including HIV/AIDS prevention and education, animal welfare, LGBTQ+ civil rights, the environment, and a host of local arts organizations. raising over $1.5 million to date. You can meet Patti and even more kings and queens on November 15th at Tour and Tasting, The Art of Drag, here at the Columbia Museum of Art.
You've been listening to Binder, a production of the Columbia Museum of Art. Today's Drag Studio Takeover was hosted by Dana Witkoski, aka Danny Soar, with special guest Patti O'Furniture. Produced and edited by me, Drew Barron. Special assistance from Joelle Ryan Cook. You can learn more about Binder, CMA exhibitions, and programs on our website, columbiamuseum.org.
I don't need to say my name, do I?
Yes.
Yes, you do.
Oh, okay. I thought we were doing that like in the other one. So
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just going to informally
say like, I'm Dana Witkoski.
Yeah.
Engagement specialist.
I mean, you don't got to go that far. I'm Dana Witkoski. And this is Binder. No.
No, that's so corny. I